Hey friends, it's me, your girl, Krista Denise, also known as KD, here with day 10 of Black History Month. Aren't you proud of me? I knew the day this time. Thank you to everybody who's been enjoying the content, liking, and sharing. You are the best. I appreciate you. Feel free to continue to comment, like, and share. I enjoy engaging with you guys. We are here. I'm going to just jump right in because this person is a baddie. I kind of wish I was in Atlanta right now because I actually got this person's Barbie. They are so iconic that Barbie made a baby doll after them. And I got it. Okay, I got the Barbie. This is tonight's topic, or tonight's person is Ida B. Wells-Barnett. If you don't know, let me tell you something you about to know, because Shawty was bad, okay? Do you hear me? She was a baddie, and she did so much for the field of journalism, again, education, and there's just a lot to make it work, right? Make it happen. So she was born in 1862, and she was actually born enslaved in the state of Mississippi. But as we all know, the Civil War broke out, slavery was ended, and she grew up most of her life as a free woman. She had her primary years during the period of Reconstruction, which I mentioned before. It may end up being one of the videos. And she transitioned in 1931. She was a journalist. She was an anti-lynching crusader, and she was a civil rights pioneer. She was absolutely fearless in the movement she participated in. She also participated in the suffragist movement, which was a movement working to give women the right to vote in the United States. And her relentless work exposed the horrors of lynching in America and challenged both racial and gender inequalities. She is, if you've ever seen a picture, it's an older picture, it's a black and white picture. There's a sign hanging out a window and it says, like, a man was lynched today, or a black man was lynched today. She was the person doing that on a regular basis, and she would hang that sign on her window literally daily as she found out the stories of lynching. But, you know, we talked before about that. But I just wanted to give people a reference point. If you've ever seen that photograph, that is a photograph that basically was made possible by the work of Ida B. Wells-Barnett. So again, she was born into slavery in Holly Springs, Mississippi, shortly before the Emancipation Proclamation, and she grew up during Reconstruction and witnessed firsthand the violent backlash against Black progress. She was orphaned at the age of 16, and she took on the responsibility of raising her siblings, and this fueled her independent spirit and sense of justice. She used her skills as a writer and a speaker to challenge white supremacy, often at great personal risk. She regularly got death threats. And her pioneering investigative journalism made her one of the founding figures of the modern civil rights movement, and her work continues to influence racial justice and feminist activism today. Okay, so some of her key accomplishments. Again, she was a pioneering investigative journalist exposing lynching in America. In the late 1800s, she became one of the first investigative journalists in the United States that used her platform to expose the systematic lynching of Black Americans in the South. So what happened was in 1892, three of her very close friends, Thomas Moss, Calvin McDowell, and Henry Stewart, were lynched in Memphis, Tennessee, because they opened a successful Black-owned grocery store, and it was competing with the local white business. And I think they tried to buy them out, and the men were like, no, we're good. And so they killed them and basically stole their business. And that event, which was a very tragic event, it sparked her lifelong crusade against lynching. She was like, not on my watch. She published Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in all its phases in 1892 and The Red Record in 1895, and she meticulously documented lynching cases and debunked the myth that lynchings were carried out to punish Black men for crimes against white women. She revealed that lynchings were used as a tool of racial terror and economic oppression, and they were attempting to control and intimidate Black communities, and she wasn't having it. It was revolutionary because at this time, you basically have white-dominated media, and they ignored and often justified the lynchings that were taking place, but she boldly confronted them with truth, often at the risk of her life and livelihood. And her fearless reporting laid the foundation for investigative journalism as we know it today and inspired future generations of journalists and activists. As if that would not be enough, she's actually one of the co-founders of the NAACP and an early civil rights organizer. She was a founding member in 1909, and through her contributions her contributions were often overlooked due to her outspokenness and refusal to conform to male-dominated leadership styles. She was still a part of it and a part of why we have what we have today. She also helped organize Alpha Suffrage Club in Chicago, which was the first Black women's suffrage organization advocating on behalf of Black women's rights to vote specifically. And she worked on behalf of racial justice in housing, education, and in the legal system, confronting not only white supremacy, but also sexism within the civil rights movement. She said everybody can get it. She was a very vocal critic of racism within the women's suffrage movement. Many white suffragists, including prominent leaders like Susan B. Anthony, were willing to exclude Black women from their campaigns to gain support from Southern white women. And so what she did is at the 1913 Women's Suffrage Parade in Washington, D.C., organizers had asked Black women to march in the back to avoid upsetting the Southern participants. She refused and boldly stepped into the front of the parade, and marched directly alongside white suffragists from Illinois. She says she's not playing with y'all. And she continuously challenged white feminists to recognize and address the specific struggles faced by Black women. Because what? Intersectionality. She took her anti-lynching campaign to an international stage, speaking in Great Britain in the 1890s to raise awareness and garner global support for the fight against lynchings in the U.S. Her work put international pressure on the U.S. government to address racial violence and expose the hypocrisy of a country claiming to be the land of the free and justice while allowing such atrocities. She said, we gonna call a spade a spade. And if this was like, as if she hadn't done enough, in 1930, she ran for the Illinois State Senate, making her one of the first Black women to run for public office in the United States. Now, although she did not win, her candidacy was absolutely groundbreaking and paved the way for future generations of Black women in politics. You don't necessarily get a Shirley Chisholm without an Ida B. Wells-Barnett. How dope is that? So here are some things we can take from what Ida B. Wells-Barnett did and continue to apply to our life today. 1, speak truth to power, even when it's dangerous. She risked her life to expose injustices that others were just too afraid to confront. Her Memphis newspaper office was actually destroyed by a white mob, and she received constant death threats, but she continued her work. It is what it is. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's what we do in spite of it. Her life teaches us that confronting injustice requires bravery and resilience, even when it comes at personal risk. So we have to remember to use our voices and speak out against racism, sexism, and systemic oppression in our communities, in our workplaces, and online platforms. Even small acts of truth-telling can make a significant impact. Also, the power of documentation and storytelling. She understood that data and stories could be powerful tools for social change, and as a researcher, I feel her. By meticulously documenting lynching cases and sharing the personal stories of victims, she humanized the statistics and made it impossible for people to ignore the truth. Facts matter, but stories inspire action. Combining evidence with personal narratives helped her to change people's minds and hearts, and it can help us to do the same thing. We can use storytelling, whether through writing, social media, podcasts, art, you name it, to highlight injustice and amplify marginalized voices. Another thing, yet again, intersectionality is essential to activism. She didn't just separate her fight from racial justice, she did not separate her fight for racial justice from her fight for women's rights. She recognized that Black women face unique challenges and that true justice required addressing multiple overlapping forms of oppression. Activism should always be intersectional. You can't fight for gender equality without addressing racism and vice versa. And we can do this by supporting movements and leaders that prioritize intersectional approaches to social justice. We need to center the voices of Black women, LGBTQ+ individuals, and other marginalized groups in our activism and in the activism that we support. Another thing, the big thing, don't wait for permission to lead. She often found herself at odds with both white suffragists and Black male leaders because she refused to be silenced or sidelined. She didn't wait for anyone's approval, and I love that. She created her own platforms, and she led by example. So if you see a gap in leadership or advocacy, fill it. You don't need to wait for validation to make a difference. You can start your own organization, your own podcast, community project, or campaign, and you can use your skills and passion to create the change you want to see. And finally, keep fighting, even when your recognition is delayed. Despite her incredible contributions, she often was overlooked in her time, and even within the movement she helped to shape. However, she never stopped fighting, and her legacy has only grown stronger with time. Change takes time, and you might not always get immediate recognition for your work, but it cannot stop you from doing the work because it does not mean your contributions are any less valuable because other people don't see it. Stay committed to your goals, even if the impact does not right away visible to everyone. Your efforts matter, and history will remember those who stood on the right side of justice. So with that said, remember, do what you need to do to be more than okay because you deserve to be more than okay. Absolutely do what you need to do to live a life you love because you deserve to live a life you love. But while you're living that life you love, don't forget to make a difference for your life and the lives of others, like our good sis, Ida B. Wells-Barnett. That's all I have for you today. Love you. Mean it. Bye. Mwah.